Good afternoon, Brad. Welcome to my podcast, One for the Road. It's a joy to have you on. It's midday where you are in LA, right?
Yes. How are you, Dave?
I'm
It's
very
my
well.
honor to be on. I'm a fan of yours.
Oh, it's a real pleasure.
Appreciate what you do.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I've been tricky to get hold of, haven't I? Because every time we've gone to put this in, I've been on holiday, which sounds really indulgent, but that's how it rolls.
That's a good thing. I
Yeah,
love your self-care.
yeah,
That's very important.
it is. I've just come back from my FIFA, and next week I'm going to Thailand. So,
Nice.
all the
Oh, I've never been there.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going 3 days on my own, and then I'm going to retreat to do some yoga and breath work and just take in the ambiance and just fully relax. That's what I need.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. How have you been? All right. You busy?
I've been good, never fully relaxed in my life. I'm afraid of that. I think, but in retrospect, it sounds wonderful. But I'm doing great. Life is good. I try to live in my little pocket of gratefulness, about to hit 28 years sober in April.
That's incredible.
And life is great, better than ever. It's great to say at 65, I've never been happier. And that was kind of the goal.
Well, do you know what's lovely, Brad, is that you're still willing to have these conversations after 28 years rather than just say, well, that was then, this is now, because
Oh
these kind
no.
of stories are so important to cover. And thank you so much for joining. Um,
Oh, anytime.
as per usual, Brad, with my podcast, we start right at the beginning. So, what was it like for you growing up?
Well, let me see. I grew up in a house where I was the youngest of three brothers. My two older brothers were actually from my mother's first marriage, and then my father was my mom's second marriage. My father ended up having six marriages, all in all. He was going to do it till he did it right, but it was a house with quite a bit of dysfunction, much better than many people have experienced in their childhoods. But the reality of it was my mother suffered from extreme depression, manic depression. She also had a sleeping pill addiction. So my mother spent most of her life and my childhood in bed, pretty much kind of blocked off from reality, from family. She would make an appearance every now and then. There was stuff going on there that I think she just refused to look at any of it or deal with any of it. There was a pain that none of us are really able to tap into to see what maybe was the catalyst of a lot of her depression and pain. Um, I think by knowing her sister and her brother, possibly genetics played a part and chemical, but my mom was never willing to realistically get a grip in her life. And I really didn't know that she had a pill issue until much later in my life. Uh, when I was working on my sobriety, and I was like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I knew she took sleeping pills, but I didn't understand the severity of it until later in life. Um, my father and I were extremely close. Uh, there was no addiction of any kind in his regard, but he was bipolar and incredibly kind, a heart of gold, but always trying to rally his emotions. They were really never intact. It was extreme swings that that plagued his life, and he really didn't get diagnosed until his late 50s, early 60s. And at that point, I think a lot of the emotional and the mental divisiveness just kind of weared away at him. And he started to get a little more delusional. He didn't want to stay on his meds. He refused to do that. He, again, a great guy, but I felt like very early on in my life, like I think most people that are raised around mental illness or some kind of addiction, you end up raising your parents, especially for comedians. Well, I have two unhappy parents, so I'm going to try to make them laugh, or I'm going to play them a song, or I'm going to dance for them. All the things that parents should kind of be doing for children as we grow up. So the relationship, the role playing switched. My brothers were pretty much out of the house. My oldest brother was 9 years older than me. The middle brother was 6 years older than me. And because of the chaos, which was unfortunately created by my mom, a lot of the time, they just got out as soon as they could. My mom, interestingly enough, which is classic addict behavior, is she was always creating chaos within the family, things that didn't exist, fights with the family, um, uh, anger and blowups, and things that would separate her from her brother, her sister, her children, her husband at the time, so she could retreat into bed and use and take her downers, and she would be able to blame the world for her absence and her addiction. And a lot of us do that as addicts. Thing with me is like, I would use when things were great, and I would use when things are bad, which I think all addicts do. You know, we don't need an excuse. So that was kind of my thing, my retreat. I loved numbing. But my father was always there for me. I took the divorce with great difficulty. I had a lot of trouble with that. There was a lot of back and forth and bad rapping, mostly, unfortunately, on my mom's behalf. My mom didn't like men. She had an issue with men. And she had 3 sons. So that kind of gives you an idea. She had a love-hate relationship with her children, I believe. And the older I get, and as I worked through my sobriety, but it took me even way past my sobriety, I do look at it with more of an empathy for my mom. It was tough because she conquered and divided. She tried all she could to keep her sons from their fathers, to keep us fighting within our sibling rivalries, which really never existed. But there is an empathy. For my father, I always had it. I had a lot of emotional stuff growing up at a very young age. I suffered from huge anxiety as a kid. I had all sorts of tics when I was young, things I would do that were not just maybe OCD. I had extreme ADD. No one knew what that was. Never comfortable in my own skin. Very awkward child. I was like 5'10" at 11, and I couldn't play any ball. I was a horrible athlete. So I never found my niche until I started making people laugh, which was early on, because believe it or not, being a giant kid, because I couldn't stand up for myself physically or mentally, because I wasn't there yet, I was bullied a lot. I was an easy mark. And that added to my anxiety and my other stuff. So very early on, at like 9 or 10 years old, as much as my father was rallying himself, or as my dad used to say, I'm dancing as fast as I can, which I really never understood till I was older. That was his bipolarity, his mental illness. He owed 3 women alimony. He was broke all the time and worked 7 days a week, trying to pay for those, mistakes, those marriages. But he was always there for me. It was incredible. I wish he could have been there for himself nearly as much, but he decided to get me into therapy when I was 10 years old in 1970, which was unheard of, for a child to be in a therapy. But he knew what was going on at home with my mom was more than either of us could handle. Because she created such fear in a kid that was suffering from extreme anxiety. And that therapy, even early on at 10 years old, saved my life, literally, figuratively. And I was friends with that therapist up until 4 years ago when he passed at 93.
Wow.
And we got to be friends throughout our life and stay in touch. I had a podcast for a short time. I don't have your gift with podcasts that you have. So I got out of it early. But one of my episodes was interviewing my 90-year-old therapist who I met when I was 10.
Wow.
And it was so cathartic and it was so wonderful. And so I'm
probably
really
did.
rambling, but that was the nix of the childhood.
That's incredibly powerful. I mean, at 10 years old, what you had to deal with and basically grow up really quickly as well. Because I've had a guest on my podcast who was a child of an alcoholic, John Taylor, and he used to have to put his mum to bed at age 7 or 8 years old before his dad come home in case he caught her drunk and then give her a beating. So at 7 or 8 years old, he's dragging her mum to the bed to shut the door, and blessed in a way, your dad got you therapy at that age, 10 years old. It's probably saved you in a way, because,
It saved me. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's no question. I mean, there was a lot of work to be done and a lot of unraveling, needless to say, but it was a safe haven for me, that therapist, every Tuesday at noon. I would be taken out of class every week for that. And that created, the kids would go, "Why do you leave every Tuesday at noon?" And I would say, "Well, I have a dentist appointment." "What's wrong with your teeth?" And I was like, "Well, it's an ongoing," I was constantly pivoting, for that. But yeah, my dad was, it was interesting. He was always ahead of the curve with mental health. And, he never drank, he never used, but he was beaten growing up as a child constantly by his father, who wasn't a drinker. And there was no addiction on his end, but there was quite a bit on my mom's side. But yeah, he was there for me. It just broke my heart that we couldn't, he couldn't have had more. We were so close. We had a lot of fun and joy together. But as he aged, he became fanatical about religion. And that was all part of, it would be exacerbated when he was off his meds. And he was rarely on his meds. But he became a fanatical with Christianity. And he was raised a Jew. And, I've never been big in the religious thing. I've given it up to a higher power myself, but it's never really been God. It's been other stuff, But through that fanaticism, a lot of people, I think when they go off the deep end or when they hit their end emotionally, they turn to God many times because they feel he's unforgiving. I mean, all forgiving, excuse me. They feel that he's all accepting. So it's kind of like a last resort, I think, for people. And it became that for my father. And as he took on religion more and more, it kind of created a little bit of a wedge in the last couple relationships he had. I loved him unconditionally, and that didn't change how I felt about him, but it changed how we navigated our relationship.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
I hear that, Brad. So what was it like going through school then? Because you say you were bullied because you was tall. And you were
Yeah,
no good
and
at.
uncoordinated. And, I looked like Liza Minnelli from the ages of like 11 to 17.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. Um, but yeah, I was messed with a lot, man. And it was interesting. Why, but I reeked vulnerability. And uh, that's kids are brutal. And I think that's why I spend most of my stand-up roasting the front row, just relentlessly, because I think deep down it's my way of getting back.
Yeah.
Though I don't bully,
No, no.
but I
How old
don't
were
suggest
how
sitting in the
old was you?
front.
Yeah, yeah. How old was you when you first started doing stand up then? Because it's amazing how you've turned all that into humor, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that was my survival, and I know that sounds so cliche, but I think it is for artists. I think we tap into something because the majority of artists are loners. We deal with one kind of fear or another. We need to feel accepted. I think, I've always said, I think, people go, God, comics and actors, you're so insecure, you got to be loved. And I'm like, well, plumbers have to be loved, and truck drivers and doctors, and
Yeah.
these people, we all need to be loved. It's how we get to it and what we do when we don't feel it.
Mm.
That's the key. But I started stand up really early. It was weird. I started stand up um, my first year in high school, and it all started when I hosted a teacher appreciation night. And I wasn't a great student, but I was diligent. I was a strong B, and teachers was the first place that I felt accepted outside of my relationship with my father. And teachers, they got that I was you know in the goon squad, I called it. I lived in the goon squad. All the kids that needed that extra arm around them, the kids, the redheads, the overweight kids, and I had the tics in school, which was a whole other thing. But I started stand up early, and I was bit early on, but I always did impressions, again, to make my father laugh. My dad loved impressions. So I would do impressions of people in the family, and different celebrities that we liked on TV or actors. So I started it early, and not only to make my dad laugh, and sometimes my mom would laugh, you know, um, but the kids, I would keep them at bay. The bullies, I would make fun of myself before they would get to me.
Yeah.
So I beat them to the punch, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And then as I got a little older, I would roast them. And they loved that because, bullies aren't used to that. So it was my whole life, I've just been trying to find that niche of survival. And it was exhausting, and I think that's what made me turn to numbing. I loved numbing. I'm not going to sit here and say I didn't love it, but I knew it was going to kill me, and my metabolism, because I'm large. I could do a bottle of vodka and be like, "Hey, what do you want to do now?" And I knew that was going to kill me. The numbing, like everyone else, it stopped the voices, and it became something I could just, you know, I was out of whack, and there were drugs. My main thing was weed. Weed was huge for me, but I smoked around the clock. And then if I had a job that wasn't stand up, I would take a break for that period while I would do that job, an acting job. I didn't work high. I worked high as a stand up all the time, and I loved it up until 27 years ago. But if it was an acting thing, I had that paranoia of where, nowadays actors are smoking weed and they walk into a shot and they film it. Back then, it was, of course, frowned upon. Um, but I was a very high functioning alcoholic and weed smoker. Weed was around the clock. I mean, I wouldn't get out of bed without hitting it, and I wouldn't go to bed without being, totally numb. And the booze, I was mostly a night drinker. I drank alone, hit it hard. And yeah, am I going too far ahead?
Not at all, mate. We can wind it back, right? Because, like, when you started stand up, was there nerves, adrenaline there? Because I've read through your Wikipedia earlier, and you've you've been opening act for Diana Ross, Liza Minnelli, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., all the big names, right? Huge
Mhm.
responsibility, right?
Yeah.
How old were you like when you first started drinking? But how old were you when you think really you started to rely on it a little bit?
Well, it was interesting. I never smoked a joint. I never had a beer in high school.
Mm.
I didn't start till I was about 20. And it was in moderation. I was a red wine guy once in a while. I'd have a couple glasses. When I was opening for these legends, I walked out there straight. And then after I was done is when I would hit it. The responsibility and the honor of opening for these people. I really kept it together, and I wasn't really in the throngs of addiction in those early days. I started opening for those people in my mid 20s, so my partying would be fast and brisk after I finished the job, and I would spend all day hungover, and I would be okay by 5 or 6, and I would open for them at 8 o'clock, and it was just a thing. And then after I did my thing, I would go to, a bar or my dressing room or the casino and just have a great old time and do that. So again, I was high functioning. I was able in those years to kind of curtail it and figure out a schedule that worked with my addiction. Now, I would smoke weed during the day, obviously, but I had that 2 hour window where I had to be straight early on. And then when things started to really roll for me and I started doing TV and getting those other shots, the fear crept up, the shame crept up, the regret crept up. And the biggest thing was, when you start to hit it, and it's literally what you dreamed about your whole life, the biggest fear is, what if it goes away?
Mm.
What if I lose it? What if I stop? What if the world knows what an alcoholic or addict I am? What if right? So that propels everything. And the addiction, the addiction loves it because when you're an addict, it is impossible to live in gratefulness. And my gratefulness is now I've been very lucky to be alive. I'm fortunate. I had, as crazy as my childhood was, it wasn't nearly as those horror stories that you hear about, like what you shared with me a little while ago, Dave. There was a lot of love. There was just a lot of dysfunction and people dancing as fast as they could, right?
Mm.
But you can't live in gratefulness when you're using to the point I was using. And without gratefulness, you have no barometer to what is good and what is bad and what is healthy and what is unhealthy. And I think that's what we all struggle with when we're in abuse.
Yeah. I think as well, it's important to remind ourselves that when we go through this stuff as a kid, we've only got the emotional intelligence of a kid. It's only when we're older we rationalize it more, don't we? Like what you said about
Yes.
understanding your mum more and being more self-aware of it and more compassionate towards your mum and what your dad was going through. When you're sober, for me, I become so much less judgmental. I was angry with
Yes.
the world, Brad, and I was angry with myself and who I'd become. So I used to like take it out on everyone because I was quite bitter inside. But it was when I
Yes.
stopped drinking and I thought about when my mum left when I was 14 was
Mm.
more rational. But when it happened at 14, I didn't have the emotional intelligence. And that then led on to me drinking the way I did because I was numbing the pain. I didn't understand the pain.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at it as a two-prong attack with it. It's like you know, we talk about the inner child work and that. And I think of little Dave at 14 years old reading that note from his mum saying, I've left your dad, I'll be in touch. And as I said before, Brad, you're from a similar era to me. No internet, no mobile phone, no social media. When she left, I didn't know where the hell she was, and I had no way of finding out either. And then a month later, my dad met someone, fell in love with her, and I felt completely on my own, right? And that was what stuck with me for years and years and years. And that's what created my drinking, was like what you just said articulately, was the numbing. It becomes part of your everyday tapestry of life, doesn't it? It's like, you know,
it's survival.
It is survival, you know, and as Gabor Mate says, it's not why the addiction, why the pain, you know. And you grew up in an environment that was really unstable, actually, and you had the love from your dad and indirectly from your mum, but it was very unstable. And then you went to school and you were a big guy and you were bullied, and, you know, in a way, it makes you understand more why we do it, doesn't it?
Sure, you bet. There's no question about it. And you know, it's funny. I had when I got clean, and I was living with the clarity I really never had. With it, you know, it took a while for my empathy to kick in, because not numbing made things very clear to me and made some of the things happening around me feel very unkind and deliberate, you know. Because I remember when my mom was in one of her, you know, phases, which was weekly, my stepdad almost guarded her door. To where I was a kid, I'd say, hey, you know, I want to say goodnight to mom, or I want to make sure mom is okay. And he'd go, yeah, tonight's not a good night. And I'm like, well, I didn't see her last night, and I want to make sure she's okay, you know. And he's like, you know what, we'll do it tomorrow. So all of a sudden, because I didn't get addiction as a, you know, 8 or 9-year-old, I thought she was sick. And she would obviously, you know, she would do this, she would say to her kids, oh, you guys are killing me, you know, and we would take it literally, right? When you're young, you don't get the other, you know, the irony in that line. And when we weren't able to see her, we thought she was being kept from us because there was something really wrong with her, as opposed to what was wrong with her, God bless her, was, you know, she was you know, an addict, or suffered from that depression. So when I got clean, there was like, I had to work through a lot of anger and disappointment, which I thought I had worked through, you know, but you can't really work through it when you're high.
No, you can't. I mean, I had therapy for 6, 7 years, and I didn't even tell him. He's actually a good friend of mine now, and I didn't tell him throughout that whole time about my drinking, which was crazy, because he could have helped me with that, you know, but I was in massive denial with it, Brad. And,
wow,
you know, I used to come out there with all this like knowledge, and I was really motivated and inspired, get in the car, and I'd drive home without the radio on so I could just think about it. Then I'd open a litre of vodka, guzzle that down, wake up in the morning completely hungover and forgotten anything he'd said, because I was in the moment and the hangover. And this went on for years, you know. And you have to have a clear mind. And it was when I stopped drinking that the therapy actually started to kick in, you know.
Yeah.
But going back, Brad, so you say that you were drinking a bottle of vodka and it wasn't touching the sides. Like when your TV career started kicking off, where was your level of drinking then?
Well, let's go with, I mean, when it really took off, I mean, I was doing, you know, late night shows and guesting on shows, but obviously my career took off with Raymond. That's when things kicked in. Again, didn't drink during the day when I was filming. Once in a while, I'd have a little weed at lunchtime, but was very paranoid because it was a very straight set. The cast, the crew, really not a lot of people using at least in what you could tell during work hours. So I was able to white knuckle it, but I did drink at night very heavily the first year of the show, and never missed a rehearsal, was never late, never, knew my lines. I mean, it was, it was a crazy balancing act. And then I hit a very soft bottom. Luckily, nothing disastrous, never arrested, though I should have been many times. But I hit a bottom where I was just done right after I wrapped the first year of Raymond. And as corny as it sounds, I knew I really wanted to be a father at this point in my life. Things were working well. We didn't know that the show was a hit yet, but we knew we were being picked up for a second year. And I wanted to be a dad. And it's like the relationship I had with my father, I wanted to be able to feel as a dad, but with more strategy to it, with less volatility. And when I say volatility with my dad, again, it was the swings, never directed towards me, but to watch him go through. So I wanted to have that. And I knew there was no way I could use why I was a dad. That would go against everything that I ever believed in. So I just one night, I had my last bender in Hawaii. I was sitting on the beach. I got in a ridiculous fight with someone I was in Hawaii with, always trying to push people away so I didn't have to risk the abandonment that I felt many times as a kid. I'll abandon you before you abandon me. I know you get that. And I was just done. I was just so, because here I am. My dream was to have a hit series. There was one sitting in my lap, and I was blacking out, man. I was blacking out, really worrying if I would ever wake up again. And that's when when I called it. And then that was in '97, and I came back to the show year two, with a clarity I never had. My biggest fear was there's no way. How am I going to be funny if I'm not loose? How am I going to be? I was never loose as a drunk. I was uninhibited, but I was a rummy. All of my instincts that got me to where I wanted to be were numbed. There's really no profession you can do well numb. You can get through it. We see musicians do it all the time. But to really have those synapses as an artist, to be in the moment, it is impossible when you're numb. Sure, you can pull it off. You can break a guitar or, throw a microphone at a guy in the front row when he heckles you. But that isn't why you got into the business. So I started to hit this clarity. And my biggest fear was so much of my stand-up later in my life, when I wasn't an opening act, when I was headlining my own gigs, I was high or drunk, and I thought I was killing it, and I wasn't. And the people that would come see me, all they saw was a guy that was off, but pulling it off. It's like, wow, man, great show, as in, fuck, I can't believe you worked that high.
Yeah.
So everyone's bullshitting you, especially in my industry. The minute you start to click, people start kissing your ass, and you find yourself surrounded by people that just fuel your addiction. They want you to stay high. They want to be part of whatever you earned or didn't earn. And so there's that element. It's a crazy balancing act.
Yeah.
But it was, I came back year two straight, and every year the work would get better. I would get better, because what was interesting is, when I worked high, I thought I was uninhibited, and maybe I was, but the risks I needed to take as a comedian and as an actor, risks by, I mean, risking and pushing yourself to another level, to have this fearless freedom as an artist. It is an impossibility to have high. And I've proven it many, many times. And other fellow comedians or actors that are close to me that are suffering right now have, and then I have those that have gotten sober. You know, we talk about it, and I was like, because my improv ability was really better than anything I could ever write. I was never a great comedy writer. My ability and my delivery to just get out there in the crowd and create stuff or not create it was really my gift, and also how I kind of got off on it. Wow, you know, I'm able to do this and risk. But it wasn't risks, you know. It was a high wire act, which could have gone awry at any minute. When I got clean, I was able, for the first time, to really push the envelope in creativity, not in behavior.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it until I was really clean. Sure, the first few times on stage sober was not great, but I knew it's where I had to be. And it created a vulnerability in me that I shared with the audience. And it brought so many people around. They loved to know that we're as flawed as you. You know, we're as addicted as you, we're as sober as you, where anything is really possible. And I don't talk a lot about my sobriety in my stand-up. I will allude to it sometimes because in a group of strangers, it will never be taken correctly. But I love when people reach out or I can talk to them one-on-one or you know, let them know that there is a way out. But it's, you got to want it, man. And I know you've touched on this many times. There's no silver bullet. There's no secret recipe. You got to want it. There's no way to you get to it. And wanting to quit and wanting to continue, that window for me, for people that I admire, is so damn small.
Yeah.
That window of, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Doesn't mean you're going to stay with it, but it's such a small window, because when we're addicted in our limited brain, you know, the positives outweigh the negatives because we've convinced ourselves the world is against us. I'm not good enough. I'm not deserving. People don't care. But, you know, it's everything the drug and the alcohol want you to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite often the opposite. We've got so many limiting beliefs that we hook onto, haven't we? You know, we're going to lose our friends and I'm going to be boring. And because you know, to me, it's like, I always say, it's like poison ivy that it grabs itself around your toe and grows and grows. And then before you know it, it's got its hand around your throat, right? Because it wants you alone. It wants to kill you. So when you decided enough was enough, how did you actually do that? Like day one to, you know, what happened there?
You know, it's funny. I had a sliding sobriety date. I came back from Hawaii in April of '97. I just never touched booze again. I was so hooked to the weed that after the booze, I had 5 more days of weed. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to stop the weed, but I did. And to be honest, Dave, it was, I wasn't a meetings guy. I went to a couple meetings. I've been in Al-Anon. I went to maybe 10 times a few years ago when I had people in my life suffering that I couldn't reach. But I knew I wouldn't be able to reach until they were ready. So I went to Al-Anon, which really helped me. I only went about to 10 meetings. I just got sober because I wish I was just done. I was just done. I didn't want to die. Um, I felt I hit this spot where I wanted more emotionally. Uh, and I wanted to be a good dad, a better son, a better brother. Um, I was the glue in my family. I was always the glue. I was the one that, put the fire out in the rivalries and in my mom's chaos. I was always the one to, because I was the youngest and the last to leave and was there quite a while one-on-one with her, that I had an in with her that my other brothers didn't have. I had a way of kind of talking her off the bridge, if you will, and also for my father. So I was always the fixer. And when you have a childhood that is out of sync, uh, you become a huge control freak. And I was later in life. And because you have to control your childhood to survive. And it's an instinct and a tool you should never have to acquire as a kid. But we talked about that we both had to. So that was my survival. So I was always trying to control my environment. I was trying to oversteer my relationships, my my connection with family. The minute it started to tilt, I had to fix it, and I was exhausted. And it was something I did from a very early age, and it seemed to be that the alcohol and the drugs kept me in that mode of having to constantly fix and control and make sure everyone was happy. And I think I was just exhausted when I stopped. I felt physically that I may not make it. And it just it was the booze or me. And the numbing that I loved went from a great 3 hours to a great 2 minutes. And then the hatred I had for myself and the guilt and the shame, it was me or it.
Mm.
And I chose that, on the beach face down in Hawaii that night, that and oddly enough, when I cold turkeyed it, yeah, sure, there were some. But even the worst day, as we say, was better than the best day drunk. And, there's so many people I wish that I love, that I care about out there, that I wish they'd get to that point. But even with friends looking for sobriety or relatives, you know, you can't tell them how great it is, because when you're in addiction, you feel like everyone's fucking trying to sell you.
Mm.
And I hated that. And there was an intervention that people I cared about did with me early. And I was in such denial. It was like, no, you don't understand. Look how great my life is. How can I be an alcoholic? And,
Well, it
we know
doesn't
that thing.
discriminate whatever you're doing, does it? It's just out to get you. And, it's true what you said about the window, because people know my story. And a friend suggested he would do it with me, right? So he wasn't telling me I need to stop. He was saying, why don't I join you? Or why don't you join me for 3 months to stop drinking? And it felt like a really good collaboration, right? Because if he'd have said to me, Dave, you're a right mess, mate. You need to sort your life out, I'd have stuck my middle finger up and drunk more. And it was the fact he said, why don't we do it together? And that night I texted him and I said, are you in? If you'd have said no, I might not be here today. That's how small my window was. It's because he said, come and see me. That night in 2019 was the last time. Like, that was it for me, right? But what I always think of, Brad, is that if he'd
Which is
said it's
incredible.
out, and there was an England football match on that night, and my neighbour had said to me as I left Piers' house, he said, Dave, the match is on. Do you want to come around for a couple of beers? I said, I don't drink. I literally said it right there and now, I don't drink, after 40 years of drinking. And it felt so liberating. But it's
Wow.
important to say, Brad, as well, for the listeners, that people know that I was drinking a litre of vodka a night or 4 bottles of wine a night. Please, please, please reduce. If you're at any level of dependency, you need to reduce gradually. And I didn't. I just stopped, and it could have killed me. You know,
Yeah.
I just went cold turkey straight away. And it was a
Wow.
really dangerous thing for me to do. So I really encourage people that if they've got any form of dependency, to go and seek medical help, because, you know, you can have a
100%.
seizure, and, you know, and
Yeah.
it's important to say that. But
Very
I mean,
important. Yeah.
so moving on, like, because Peter Boyle in Everyone Loves Raymond's not a drinker, and also Patricia Heaton as well. So I think she's the same as me, 7 years. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yes.
Was you a part in Patricia's sobriety as well? Because you've been sober for a long time.
You know, I was not. It's something that wasn't even evident to anybody, because, you know, we did have a lot of downtime and we did go out to dinners and lunches and parties together that we had to do, even though I always hated the parties. But it was never evident to me. And she shared it with me a few years ago that it was something, because she knew I was sober. And I'll never forget how happy I was for her, and how important it was. And I'm like, you know, she's a strong gal. And she knew. I said, I'm here for whatever, but she did it her own way. And we really never got into it or talked much about it. But every once in a while when I would see her, she would say, yeah, I'm still there,
Amazing.
still doing it. And it was great. And Peter Boyle, God bless him, uh, he was sober, and he would have small, tiny AA meetings in his dressing room. This is even before I went clean. One of my first meetings was going into Peter Boyle, sitting there, and there were some of the crew that were AA, and he would just do the prayer, and he would just say, "How's everybody doing?" And he was an old timer, man, and I never knew it, and I shared with him what I was going through, and he knew when I came back year two, I said I stopped. And he went, "Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, we do little meetings once a week. You ever want to pop in?" And I did a couple times, but I was still dealing with shame and ego. So I didn't take advantage of it as much as I should have. But, you know, I'm not a God guy, but I like the term God shots. Little God shots come around in our lives when we're addicts, and really when we're clean.
Yeah.
And you see little validations of, yeah, this is where you need to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get them early, sometimes you get them later, but there's nothing like surrender. It's so huge. It's huge in your career.
Yeah.
People think that surrendering is giving up, or they think surrendering is quitting. It's not doing that. It's really, in my opinion, it's getting rid of all the things that kept you addicted, you know. And the number one thing is, you know, is ego
Yeah.
and hurt and pain.
Yeah.
And you know, you got to unpack your shit. I know a lot of dry drunks. I know a lot of sober guys, unfortunately, that are miserable bastards. And, you know, you got to unpack your shit that got you there.
Yeah.
You know, anybody can stop. What makes you relapse or go back is not doing the work. It's doing the work. There's a reason. Some of it's chemical, some of it's, you know, I'm always juggling because I love mental science. How much is nature? How much is nurture? Well, they both play to it. And what the percentage is doesn't matter. Just realize it's coming from two areas, and you'll know when you're, you know, you'll know when you're bit. And
Yeah.
most people that question it are bit.
Yeah. Do you know what I love, Brad? Is I feel free. I know it's always lurking in the background, and it's, you know, it's listening and it's watching and like a stalker, but I feel
Yeah.
free and I feel at peace. And what you said about ego is so big. There's a lot of ego in this space, right? But what I do, I revisit where I had my rock bottom, and everyone knows it was Eastbourne, and I lived rough on the beach for a few nights, and it could have killed me in that, you know, in really cold environment. I was sleeping rough, and I go back there every single year, at least once a year, and I sit on that bit of the beach. I go to, there's an old yoga center there that I tried to break into for a bit of warmth, but I was so drunk I couldn't even open anything. Like it was ridiculous, right? But I sit on the wall and look at the yoga center, and every time I go back, it's like I feel so humble and so grateful and lucky that I'm still here. I'm healthy. I'm 61 now, and I don't think I would be here if I hadn't stopped drinking. I think my health was so bad, and now I feel I'm living my true, authentic self, and that feels so freeing for me. You know, like I trust the universe. I'm not particularly a God kind of person myself, but I trust the process. I've got that tattooed on my leg, actually, Brad. Trust the process, because I do. And you know, I've gone through some tough times in my sobriety, and I've trusted it. And I just feel so grateful. And I don't want that to sound like a cliche either. I genuinely do.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy you're here.
Oh,
And you know, it's boy, that was emotional for me to listen to that, because I get that bench. Uh, and now you're going to Thailand and you're doing yoga.
yeah.
You know, it's all so incredible. But you know, it's funny. I don't do a lot of these, but when I saw you on Instagram, I got a vibe. And again, I'm big on the universe because there is something bigger. I just don't think man really, the majority of humans don't get it. And that's okay, because I don't know if I get it. I'm not saying, but you know, you're one of those guys that you know, you walk the walk and you talk the talk, and there's so many people that are in our space that don't share. And this is so huge that you're doing this, and I know a lot of it is part of your gratefulness, but it's so important, and I love it because you know we're talking about stuff that no one really talked about 20 years ago
No, no.
in a public forum, and it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you for
And
that, Brad.
I'm
Appreciate
glad you're
that.
good, brother. You look great.
Thank you.
Whatever you're doing, you look good. And I know you're grateful because
Yeah.
it oozes out of you, man. But you don't pontificate about it and you don't lecture about it. You just share it. And we need guys like you, Dave.
And you, mate. You know, as I said in
Thank
the
you.
beginning, after 28 odd years, to keep sharing and taking the time out, because people take seeds from these conversations. You know, they might not all relate to the amount we drank, but they relate to the situation and the feelings, right? And I
Yeah.
always say it doesn't matter how much you drink, it's how it makes you feel. And don't compare to people like us
Mm.
that were big drinkers and go, well, they were worse than me, so it makes it okay for me. Because if you're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning full of anxiety, or you're putting the kids to bed and you're thinking about that glass of wine waiting for you downstairs, so you're rushing the story, or you know, you're missing meetings or whatever, it's all relative, isn't it? Right. And
Oh boy, it sure is.
you know, if it's
It
affecting
sure
your
is.
life in any form of negative way, then it's time to just have a think about it, you know. And these conversations can just plant a little seed of maybe I need to think about it, you know. And there's always something in the way, like Christmas coming up. Oh, well, I do dry January, but there's never the right time. And actually, would you like to have a Christmas without drinking? How will your kids appreciate it? How will your partners appreciate it?
Mm.
Waking up Christmas Day with a clear head, you know? So there's, you know,
Nothing like it.
the time
All I
is
can
now.
tell you is there's nothing like it.
No, right. Before we go, Brad,
Sure.
what is your life like now? Because you've done so many things, and that you've got a beautiful wife, like absolutely stunning. You're both very lucky.
Thank you.
What
She's
is
had a lot of work done. But thank
I
you.
see. I love that.
She's yeah, she just left the room with a box full of items.
I bet.
You know, It's interesting, and I want to touch on my wife Izzy for a minute because I was sober when I met her, but I never met a woman that knew me and accepted me. And when I would go back, see, you could still be clean and have addictive behavior. That's why I'm always working on myself. And I'm really trying to be honest. And she was the first woman who, when I would have a shortcoming in an area, or I would feel myself retreating, or I would get defensive because I never trusted women. And when I drank, it only proved I couldn't trust women. She never held up a mirror to make me look at myself. She just didn't judge it, and didn't mean she accepted it, but she was there for me, good or bad. Which brings me to, she was in a place I was never there for myself, even sober. So when I met her and I saw myself pushing away and sabotaging the relationship, it was a knee-jerk reaction. How can I trust a woman? My first idea of a woman said I was killing her and would go 4 days without seeing her. We immediately go back to the old stuff. So what is great now is I continue to work on myself. When I have a reaction that I'm not proud of, I try to discover why. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better dad. But the good thing about it is that's my happy place, is my family, because I'm able to, everything I encounter, mistakes, I'm able to do it in a clear head. So I have nothing to blame. It's not about blame anymore. It's about growth. It's about being able to say, boy, I wish I was better in that discussion we had yesterday, or I wish I could have been. It's not the dread and the shame. To me, it's about the growth. And my sobriety, to me, I know it's cliche, man. It's my high. I will never have enough sober years, and that isn't regret. That's just a reality of, there's nothing like it, because there's no way you can get the feels that feed you when you're guys like us.
Mm.
So, I just live in gratefulness. And that's what I preach, and working on my stuff. I'm the father I always wanted to be. As far as an actor, a comedian, I'm excited for AI, because I think it'll finally make me the actor I've always wanted to be. I'll have to sign an AI agreement on a contract that I'm doing for TV, and I'm like, please fix whatever you can in my performance. So
Excellent. I love that. Well, look, it's been a fabulous hour with you, Brad. I'm so grateful you joined me today. Thank you so much for sharing your.
honored, Dave, and thank you for embracing all of us. Have a great trip, and an honor to get to know you.
Thank you.
Here for anything.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate you, mate, and I'll send you a postcard.
Okay. Please, appreciate you. Take care.